Try for a moment to imagine the individual that you think is most likely to make minimum wage. To me, it's a teenager working the drive-thru at a fast food restaurant. To you, it may be the kid that rides his bike and throws a newspaper at your door every morning. In reality, however, the average minimum wage worker in the United States is 32 years old and has been in that position for an average of 14 years. In reality, these people are surviving on minimum wage. They're not temporary workers in this category, but they're stuck at these minimum wage jobs for the foreseeable future. People working full-time jobs, 40 hours a week for $15,000 a year for over a decade. To support yourself on a minimum wage of that level is one of the biggest struggles in American society. Due to an economic reality of indefinite poverty, these individuals have a rough life. Rougher still, however, is the fact that a good number of these people working on minimum wage support families. Sure, you may be thinking, a small number of people may be in that situation where they struggle and can't make ends meet. But how common can it really be? Childhouse.gov, a U.S. government entity responsible for tracking just those figures, states that in 2009, 21% of children ages 0 through 17 lived in families below the official poverty line. 21%. That's 15.5 million children forced to live in unsafe conditions, going not without only luxuries, but also necessities. Children without a safe place to sleep or a meal to fill their stomachs. If 15.5 million people were affected with the disease, it would be an epidemic. The current minimum wage level in this country is creating an epidemic of poverty, and is being forced on to not only those who have had determination over their own situation, but the children and the families they're responsible for. We've created a situation where the children are forced into situations where they cannot thrive on their own because basic necessity means they have to work early and they can't go to college, they can't get skills, and they're forced into the same types of jobs that lead into the same cycle. Current minimum wage levels are set to levels which are inadequate and leave many hardworking Americans well below the poverty line. The current minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which comes out to $15,080 a year for a worker working full-time. 21% of all people living on minimum wage are the sole breadwinner in a household with a family. Even if minimum wage standards hadn't increased in the past 40 years, simply keeping up with inflation would have put the minimum wage at $10.65. You may be asking, but I'm not going to make the minimum wage. Why does this matter to me? Raising the minimum wage would help the entire economy, not just the individuals affected. In 2009, with a slight increase to the minimum wage, consumer spending increased $5.5 billion, and it's estimated that restoring minimum wage to historic levels would create a $60 billion increase in the same way. Putting money in the hands of the consumers allows them both the basic necessities which they need and the buying power which helps the businesses that they will frequent. But if giving people a higher wage has such benefits, there has to be a reason we're not passing it, right? The common assumption about the downside of raising the minimum wage have been proven to be largely untrue. Many believe that raising the minimum wage, even back to historic levels, would create a significant job loss, with businesses not being able to afford the change. In 2012, the University of Massachusetts, University of North Carolina, and University of California all published a joint study which compared adjacent counties in different states and compared employment levels when the minimum wage levels changed on one side of the border and not the other. Over a 15-year period, they showed consistently that minimum wage levels increasing do not lead to the loss of jobs. Though simple logic may lead one towards a false assumption about job loss due to minimum wage increases, it must be remembered that much of the proliferation of these campaigns saying that minimum wage would destroy capitalism, or minimum wage increase would destroy capitalism, are being proliferated by the companies that they would hurt the bottom line of. every corporation is supposed to be as profitable as possible, and this would cut into their profit. As such, I would ask that you focus on what could be incredibly a great way to help both individuals and the economy, and agree that raising the minimum wage should be a priority for our government. But in order to do anything, one must first be aware of the implications of any proposed plans that they may support. Currently, there are pushes to increase the minimum wage levels to different levels. So far, the highest I've heard would be $15, and there's a petition in New York, or a strike in New York rather, for the fast food workers, and they want $15 an hour. That may be a little bit much. The plan that I would urge you to support is called the Catching Up to 1968 Act of 2013. It's an act just to basically get us back to historic levels. In July of 2013, 100 economists from universities, including many Ivy League institutions, signed a petition in support of this bill, authored by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida. The bill calls for the federal minimum wage level to be raised to $10.50. The bill has widespread support amongst the academic community, with two key facts being supporting it being the fact that the minimum wage level adjusted for inflation would be $10.65, as well as something that most people don't think about, that the average American worker's productivity has increased dramatically since 1968. We work much harder as a society, much longer hours, and the work-life balance has shifted. The 100 economists that signed a petition in support of this bill estimate that the 1968 wages, when adjusted for inflation and production, would be equivalent to about $25 an hour now. Instead of pushing for this, which may negatively impact the economy, the bill proposed only to seek to increase for the inflation variance. Like I said, back to $10.50. The levels proposed in the bill, the economists state, would not even affect the most intensive minimum wage industries, such as fast food. In fact, the business cost increase to fast food specifically would be a whopping 2.7% increase of cost. 2.7% can be absorbed in a multitude of ways, with the most common way being a slight price increase to consumers, or they spend less money because with the higher minimum wage, they are able to keep their workers happy and they don't have to spend as much money hiring and training new workers every month, every 2 months, every 3 months. In fact, by raising the cost of a Big Mac, an average of 10 cents, the entire cost incurred by raising the minimum wage to this level would be negated. Are we really the type of country who would rather have an extra dime in our pocket than give the people that we live with livable wages? Are we really the type of country who would rather be selfish? It's really that simple. 45 million Americans would be affected by this bill, with nearly 91% being adults. Currently, the bill is at the stage where it's been introduced to Congress. It's been assigned a committee to assess the feasibility of the project. This is the perfect stage to be able to make an impact. Your voice can be heard. There's a government website where you can contact your congressman, or I'm sure you can figure out how to contact a congressman, or the contact information will be distributed. Unfortunately, however, the current prognosis for this bill to make it even past the committee and get reintroduced back to Congress is 2%. The percentage chance the Congress gives it to pass and be enacted currently is 0%. A 0% chance on a discussion of basic human decency, on allowing people the opportunity to be safe and healthy and raise a family in the same conditions. A 0% chance on a change of 10 cents to our Big Mac prices, meaning 15.5 million children aren't forced into poverty through no fault of their own. Only with enough support will such a movement gain traction. There are big money interests that are opposed. The capitalist companies have money to make their message loud, and the only way that we will be able to make any sort of impact is by making the contrary message louder. If as a society we come up with a figure in the minimum wage that is supposed to be safe and livable, and then working at the minimum wage levels, you don't even get to the poverty line, which is supposed to be the basics, the bare necessities. If minimum wage levels currently don't even get us to the poverty line, then why are they there?